Okay, so as you see, painters of southern New Jersey, I have focused today on 19th century artists, and it occurred to me I maybe should have tossed in a few 20th century artists at the last moment, but the description I sent was about 19th century painters, so it is really limited to those. And I'm using an old title from a talk I did a number of years ago, From Bonaparte to the Beaches, which literally is true for what I'm doing today. I'm starting with Napoleon Bonaparte only to say, you remember him, right? And you remember that he was defeated at Waterloo in 1815. I sort of keep all my notes on the screen these days. Why read from paper? His brother, at the same time that Napoleon was ousted, his brother Joseph decided to make a hasty retreat to the New World and moved over to Philadelphia in 1815, lived there 1815 to 16, as it says here. In New Jersey and Philadelphia, he called himself the Comte du Survilliers, which actually was taken from one of his properties. One of his properties was called Survilliers. So it wasn't untrue. I don't know if he's really a count. This is the house in Philadelphia, and I've really gotten into Google Maps and Google Satellite and Google Street View, and I'm just always fascinated to look for where people lived or where people worked. This is a Google Street View of the house where Joseph Bonaparte lived in Philadelphia in 1815 to 1816, and it's a nice, looks like a nice house, South 9th Street. Here's the side view, which is an image that I found online with the historical marker. The entrance is around the corner from the facade of the building. That might be all the architecture you get, Janet. My friend Janet is an architectural person. In 1816, he acquired a property, and I realize this is an historically minded audience, and some of you may know all this, and some of you may know more about this than I do. But Joseph Bonaparte, brother of Napoleon, acquired a country estate, Point Breeze, called Point Breeze, north of Bordentown. Bordentown now has apartments called the Point Breeze Apartments. I think that's kind of cool. He lived there from 1816 to 1839 or later. I've seen a number of different dates for his departure date. And he hosted all sorts of people. Three that I know about: the Marquis de Lafayette, who was everybody's friend in the American Revolution, Henry Clay, and Daniel Webster. And I've outlined the property, Joseph Bonaparte's property, as best I could. I do have a map from the era of his property, and I just sort of tilted it a little bit and tried to sort of do it in red, and it's roughly where his property was. His house, Point Breeze, is right down here at the southern end of the property, so I've given a similar X marks the spot for roughly where the house was. And the first artists that I'm going to talk about are artists who were affiliated with or visited Joseph Bonaparte. The Discovery Center at Point Breeze was once the gardener's house, and now it's the only surviving structure from his estate. Charles Lawrence was a local guy. Charles Lawrence was an artist from Bordentown. There are his dates: born in 1790 in Bordentown, died in 1864 in Philadelphia, the nearest big city. Artists are drawn to cities because you can sell more paintings in larger cities. There's more market. This is a view of Point Breeze as it looked between 1817 and 20, when Joseph Bonaparte had just moved there. And I know it looks tiny. This is the house. This is a kind of folly, a kind of pavilion out on the lawn. I did a close-up, which isn't too bad. You can see the house sort of well here. It looks maybe like a large timber-framed house. I don't really know. But I'm zooming in a sense, on just the house and the bridge in front of it. This is another painting by him, and this one we know is from after 1820 because Point Breeze burned down. The first house burned down in 1820. I think I said that on the last slide. It's hard to back up. So this is a different house. What you see here is Crosswicks Creek. Crosswicks Creek, where it joins the Delaware River. And Crosswicks Creek right around there has a number of really nice large houses today. I keep looking at Janet for the architectural stuff. I'm being recorded, so I'll try not to do that too often. I zoomed in and it wasn't a very good JPEG. So it's a blurrier view of the new version of Point Breeze as painted by this local artist, Charles Lawrence. Every artist who could wangle an invitation basically wanted to go to Point Breeze because Joseph Bonaparte had an art collection. More about that in a minute. This is a better image of the house post 1820. This is what the new version, I don't know whose view I'm blocking. This is by a Swiss artist named Karl Bodmer. Bodmer came to the US with Prince Maximilian of Wied-Neuwied, Germany, and they traveled around the country. And the thing that Karl Bodmer mostly painted was Native Americans. Watercolors, oil paintings, pencil drawings. He was documenting Native American life for this German, titled German explorer / scientist. So this is what the house looked like in most of Joseph Bonaparte's time there. This is the kind of thing that Karl Bodmer is better known for. The one on the right, I think, is a watercolor. The one on the left is an oil painting. And they traveled the continent, basically, 1832 to 1834. Thomas Birch, another local artist, born in England, but we count him as an American now because he came over at the age of 14. He came with his father, who was also an artist. I'm trying to think. This is Thomas Birch. Now I've forgotten the father's name. But the two of them put out a series of engravings of Philadelphia subjects. And I didn't include any of those because I'm trying to focus on New Jersey imagery. Thomas Birch here has painted the view away from the house, Point Breeze. This is in front of the house looking out toward Crosswicks Creek and that point of land, and then on the other side of the point of land, the Delaware River. And it does not back up. This is what Thomas Birch is best known for. He painted a lot of harbor scenes of Philadelphia. This is back to the view from Point Breeze, 1818. Oh, is that right? That's probably right. So this is the old house of the two. And I zoomed in on this. It's pixelating a lot. But what you see here is the balustrade surrounding the porch, the portico, some dogs in the foreground, some potted plants that maybe are coming in the winter, some people in appropriate dress of that time, and a statue, which might be a big marble statue on a very tall base. Joseph Bonaparte brought art with him. And it might be something very much like this. This is an ancient Greek statue of Hermes holding in, well, it's hard to see because it's his back. I picked a view that matches what we're seeing in the other slide. But in his left arm, which is balanced on a sort of a tree trunk with fabric, which provides a lot of extra support, there's a baby, the baby of Dionysus. And originally, baby Dionysus was looking up at grapes. We all remember Dionysus as the god of wine and revelry. So it's Hermes teasing baby Dionysus with a bunch of grapes. At any rate, it's a nude statue. We can all agree on that, even though I'm showing the back view. And one American visitor whose account of Point Breeze was published in Godey's Lady's Book, 1845, said the walls inside Point Breeze were covered with oil paintings, principally of young females with less clothing about them than they or you would have found comfortable in our cold climate. The Count, this is Joseph Bonaparte, Count de Survilliers, the Count called our attention to the sculpture of his sister Pauline, which is a topless sculpture, that is to say no clothing on the top half, and asked us to admire it. And I'll show it to you in a minute, enumerating all her charms, one after another, and demanding our opinion of them. And these are just American tourist ladies who've stopped, visited Joseph Bonaparte in his mansion at Point Breeze, and been given a tour of the art collection. And she ends her commentary with, as you may be reading ahead, "It was impossible to get away without our prudery exciting more attention than would have been pleasant." So they tried to be polite, as Joseph Bonaparte showed them a sculpture by a very well-known Italian sculptor, Antonio Canova. This is Pauline Bonaparte Borghese, because she married one of the very wealthy Italian Borghese men. And this is a small copy, a small version that was owned by Joseph Bonaparte, and it was at Point Breeze. And this is what she's talking about. The Count de Surveillet shows them this statue of his sister and admires it. And I'm just sort of wondering what were all the points of beauty that he pointed out, but I'm just not going to go there other than what I just said. It is now in the Philadelphia Athenaeum, along with a lot of things that were Joseph Bonaparte's. I've seen a shaving kit. There are plates, formal dinnerware. I don't remember what else offhand. I thought it was funny that they had a shaving kit. So here's the large version, which was commissioned by Pauline's husband. I don't know if he was a count, but Mr. Borghese, we'll call him for now. It's in the Borghese Gallery in Rome. As you can see, it's in a very ornate setting. And I guess I missed a transition opportunity here, but Joseph Bonaparte had two daughters. On the right is Zenaida, and on the left in blue is Charlotte. And the reason that I'm including another French painting, this is Jacques-Louis David, who painted the Napoleon crossing the Alps, Napoleon on the horse, is because, let's see, here's a detail of the letter that he has written them. Joseph has written to his daughters who are in France, and I can't really read it, it's in French, but you might be able to see that it says Philadelphia right at the top. And he's talking about what it's like there and how he hopes that he'll see them soon. And the younger daughter, Charlotte, does go to stay with her father at Point Breeze. So whenever it's blue like this, the name in italics and blue, it introduces a new artist. And I should move along. This is a detail of that same portrait. This is Charlotte. She had taken art lessons. One of the rumors is that one of her teachers fell in love with her and was really pining over her. And, who wouldn't fall in love with an attractive daughter of a wealthy man, especially an artist? Born in 1802 in Paris, 1826 married her first cousin, Napoleon Louis, who died just a few years later, leaving her a wealthy widow with a lot of time on her hands. She lived with her father at Point Breeze from December 1821 to August 1824, and they traveled together. Among the things that father-daughter did together was travel, and she made sketches. She made drawings. This is a drawing of Lebanon, New Jersey, about which I really know nothing, but it's in Hunterdon County. If anybody's been there, can fill in details. There is a road that we see in the middle and a house here, sort of outside of town, and the rest of town is shown right up in the foreground. She got to Paterson, New Jersey, which had, I'm trying to think, probably the biggest waterfall in New Jersey. The Great Falls of the Passaic was used, I think, as industrial, electricity at some point. She did a nice drawing of that. She also made paintings, maybe not the best paintings. This is someone she knew in the U.S., a woman named Cora Monges, painted in 1822, so this is before she went back to France. It's very classical clothing, and I always think of the various Pride and Prejudice movies, because I think of that sort of shawl, but also the puff sleeves and the low neckline and the tighter sleeves down below the puff. Very neoclassical. It's a neoclassical style. So here's Coramangi's in 1822. Here's a self-portrait painted after Charlotte Bonaparte has gone back to France. She seems to be getting better, I guess. It's a little wooden, but it might be better painted, more rounded, more sense of shading and perspective. I think she might be drawing Roman ruins or a fictitious version of Roman ruins. And I have not seen it for myself, but I think it's at the Princeton Art Museum. She also painted this self-portrait after she went back to France. I think this is in Italy, as a matter of fact. So it's after August 1824. It looks to me like Florence, Italy. It's a very elaborate portrait, much more so than the last one. And I zoomed in a little bit. She's holding a letter, maybe a letter from an admirer. We don't know. She's got amazing hair. And doesn't this, anyone who's been to Florence, I think this looks like those bridges across the river in Florence. We're agreeing? Ponte Vecchio. And is that the one with the gold and silversmiths on it? Yeah. So it's quite a romantic self-portrait. It's interesting. Two artists from Salem, New Jersey that my friends in the front row know a bit about, both named for the first president who died very early in the 19th century. I forget, 1801, 1802, something like that. George Washington Cairo, the older artist, and George Washington Nicholson, who painted these lovely scenes behind me to your left. George Washington Nicholson was a generation later, literally 30 years younger than Cairo. It's hard to say that I'll just call them George, because that would be confusing. Here's the older artist, George Washington Cairo, born in 1802. If George Washington, the president, died around then, that would make it very logical to name an artist or one's son, George Washington something. The next most popular name was Benjamin Franklin. There were a number of babies for a couple of decades named Benjamin Franklin something. Cairo was born near Newcastle, Delaware, raised in Salem, New Jersey, which was his mother's hometown. His parents divorced or separated. And by 1826 in Salem, he was working in a cabinet business, including painting furniture. And I've often included, I didn't do it for Charlotte Bonaparte, but I've often included how artists started, because in those days, you didn't automatically go to an art school. Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, I think, was our oldest school, and I think it was founded in 1805. But Cairo did not go there. He started as a tradesman and painting furniture. He started by painting portraits of people in Salem, and I've shown these before at lectures in Salem. On the left, well, both of these are the lawyer, Alfonso Louis Eakins, painted in Salem in 1828 on the left, and in 1848, 20 years later. And I don't know offhand if the artist went back to Salem. He visited family. He might have done the second portrait on a visit. It's possible that the lawyer was in Philadelphia and sat for his portrait there. I don't happen to know that. And I think he's improved from the left to the right. That's a 20-year gap. Hands were never quite his forte. So here you can see that he's left part of the hand off the bottom. And here, they're very elegant fingers, but I'm not sure they have all the right bones in them. It's a shinier, glossier surface, but I think that the entire painting is more sophisticated, a little more sympathetically done. Does he really look like he's aged 20 years? I'm not sure. The drape in the background is a little better. There's a drape here, blue drape, red drape there, a little bit better. The books look better. So Alfonso Eakins' house and law office on Market Street in Salem are still there. And Cairo, we think, painted a view of his house. a commission would likely be, I say this to my students, the first things that people want, portraits of themselves. Many of them done as wedding pairs, a portrait of the husband and the wife, and maybe they're angled toward each other. But the next most popular subject was one's estate, or in the case of a city dweller and a man with a business in a town, one's property, one's office. And I didn't put that in. He painted a number of Salem people, many of them Salem names, still today. Anne Caseby Hanna and her husband James Hanna. He was a lawyer and publisher, and Canero painted this pair. I'm guessing that it might be a wedding pair, although the backgrounds don't quite match up as much as a wedding pair typically would. They married around 1825, and I think the paintings probably date from around then. And I put in a French fashion plate from 1825 to show you how stylish she is. Even if it's painted a year or two later, this woman is following French fashion. Look at the sleeves. They've gone a little more mutton chop than the ones that we saw Charlotte Bonaparte in. Tight waist, low neckline with a slight V at the center. The hair, look at the hair. The hair is kind of amazing. But it seems as if Anne Caseby Hanna on the left is getting French fashions. I mentioned hands as being not George Washington Canero's best feature in his paintings. This is something that I saw at the Salem Historical Society, Salem, New Jersey Historical Society. It's his calling card with prices. So it's got the artist's name, Mr. Canero, list of prices, just a head, 20 by 24 inches, $125. So not bad money in those days. A bust, which is a little bit lower, 25 by 30 inches, $150. Bust with hand, I love that, $200. $50 you want a hand included. And look at the guy's hand. I'm not sure he was the best at hands. Kit Kat is a small-ish size. It was a term used back then. A small half length, down to the waist, $500. Bishop's length, which I think is interesting. It's a larger size, $800. And Canero did paint some ministers. I'm not sure about bishops. And a whole length, or we might call it a full-length portrait today, from the top of the head down to the feet, $1,500. And he did paint some. I don't know if he always got that much. In the late 1820s, Canero traveled to what was known as the Catawba Plantation. Sounds like grapes. Does that sound like grapes to anyone else? Catawba, grapes. I don't know where I get that. South of Mays Landing. Mays Landing is not on the map, but it's right here at this little jog in the road, Mays Landing, New Jersey. And he went there specifically to paint the West family, and these are two of the portraits of members of the West family that he painted. The youngest sister, Mariah West, and I have it on local authority that it was Mariah, not Maria, and George Spencer West, who was one of her brothers. And I, without going into all the details, in 1829, a number of family members died, I think from illness, although some people blame one of the surviving brothers as maybe having gone on kind of a rampage, wanting the family inheritance. I don't know about that. I think illness is more likely. The father and the mother and at least two brothers all died in 1829. Mariah West married, and look at this, 1831, 2 years later. She's free to marry whoever she wants, and she's probably feeling like she wants to get out of the family home. She marries Daniel Estelle. These are names from that area. And this actually is one of Canero's best portraits. Those of you who know about Lord Byron or Byronic hair, sort of a romantic, disheveled, handsome, the disheveled hair is a giveaway. Artists did that, and Byron was a poet. So this I think on the right is one of Canero's best portraits. Here's an old map that shows Mays Landing. I should have brought a laser, but I don't own one. Mays Landing. A refers to the Estelles, Estelle Manor and Estelleville, New Jersey. And B is even marked on the map with the Wests, the West family property, the Catawba plantation, most of whom died. So Maria died young. She married in 31 and died within 3 years. I don't know if it was childbirth or illness. Daniel Estelle married again, and he married a woman named Rebecca Smith. And their granddaughter, just as an interesting historical footnote, is shown on the right. It could be a hand-colored photograph. I found it online. I don't really know this as a work of art. But Rebecca Estelle Bourgeois, related to some people named Bourgeois that I know, became mayor of Estelle Manor City in 1825, the first woman mayor in New Jersey. So it was a family that started off with property and ended up with women in politics. Don't forget to vote. Saying nothing else. In 1831, same year, the brother and the other remaining sister both married. They both married about 2 years after the tragedy of their family losses. This is the wife of our artist. George Washington Canero in 1831 married Charlotte West, who was Mariah's older sister and something of an old maid by then. I think she was 29 when she married. That's so awful. She had somehow not married until such an old age. They moved, I do say that with a joke. They moved into Philadelphia for his career as a painter. Having her inheritance made it possible for this young man from Salem to pursue his dreams of becoming a professional artist. So wasn't it lucky for him that he painted members of the West family? This is a portrait of Charlotte West Canero and two of their children, young George, who did survive infancy, and Mariah, named for her younger sister, who died maybe 2 or 3 years after this was painted. And these are two of the children. They had 3 children who survived infancy out of 7 or 8. I've forgotten the exact number. So this is Mariah again on the left in the black dress, and Ellen, the younger sister, on the right. And they're playing with a big wash basin. This is a self-portrait of George Washington Canero around the same time, handsome looking guy. And the Library Company of Philadelphia has some photographs of him, and he looks pretty good. You remember the picture at the beginning of the section. Canero traveled. He didn't get enough work just in Philadelphia, so like many early American painters, he traveled the country, well, the East Coast, I should say. He's known to have painted in Baltimore, in Wilmington, Delaware, and in Savannah, Georgia. And this is one of the Georgia portraits, Andrew Lowe II. It's owned by Lowe House in Savannah, Georgia. And this man's son married Juliet, didn't marry him. Her name was Juliet Gordon Lowe. She married his son. This is Lowe's daughter-in-law. Of the Girl Scouts. Juliet Lowe, founder of the Girl Scouting organization. He also painted some miniatures, which may know are tiny, often on ivory, watercolors generally, so they have to be covered with glass. And I saw these identified as Mariah and Charlotte West, the older and younger sister in the West family, whose family died in 1829 and all that. But I think they look a little like the artist's daughters, which would also make sense. I think Ellen, the younger one, had a rounder face, and Mariah, the older daughter, had a longer face, and I guess I should investigate the hairstyles and see which couple of women would be more appropriate. George Washington Nicholson, my other guy from the Salem area, 30 years after Canero, a descendant of Samuel Nicholson, who settled in Salem in 1665 with the English Quaker John Fenwick. I feel like asking how many people are from the Salem area, but I guess I shouldn't keep doing things that are going to be recorded here, right? In 1832 was born near Salem, lived in Mannington Township, which is, I think, sort of north and east of Salem. And by age 17 was apprenticed to a Salem house painter. So went from painting houses, to painting furniture, to painting landscapes. This is the arc of his career and living places. Born near Salem, moved into Philadelphia for his career, and ended up the last 10 years of his life in Hammonton, New Jersey, which is where I live. This is the greenhouse that his son, George F. Nicholson, had in Hammonton. This is in a history of Hammonton. And this is his gravestone. George Washington Nicholson, the artist, is buried in Hammonton. That's me from a little while ago, before my hair changed color. Taken in 2008, I did a show of Nicholson's work for the Noyes Museum in Oceanville. So Nicholson was very much a landscape painter, and these are all typical types of landscapes. Is it the same one?
Yeah, it's the same.
It might be the same one as the one up here, which you should all look at afterwards. So summer landscapes, winter landscapes, often with children and sleds and wagons and horses, farm scenes, sort of the life of rural Americans then, possibly already a little bit retrospective, a little bit looking to the past as a time of peace and plenty. Some nautical subjects, ships, water. Here's Cape May marshes. I'm going to go sort of fast through these.
That's that one.
It is that one. Another New Jersey marsh scene. I didn't put in dates. I don't remember all the dates, and I don't think he dated a lot of these. Very specific Barnegat Light from the 1880s, around the 1880s, and Long Bar at Barnegat, that stretch of land out into the water in the right-hand painting. A winter scene of which he painted many. I think they were very popular in southern New Jersey. It strikes me that they had more snow back then than we do now. Oh, and I hit that by accident, but another nautical scene, another marine subject, a storm at sea. A Mediterranean coast scene. He went abroad. This is George Washington Nicholson, the landscape painter. And this painting here might be, the one on the right, the smaller of the two paintings in the room, might be an example of a subject painted abroad, or at least sketched abroad and painted when he got home. The one on the screen, Mediterranean coast scene, I don't have an exact location for it. He actually traveled with a friend whose family was in the carpet business. And I know this because they were neighbors and they got sequential passports. Nicholson, and I've forgotten the family name of the carpet, but Philadelphia carpet makers got their passports one right after the other and were friends. He almost definitely went to England and probably Paris. Moorish Bazaar, a Moorish bazaar. And I don't think I put in a close-up of this, but you can see a huge horseshoe arch. And maybe the people near the front can see that these are dark-skinned men with turbans and long robes. And it's very exotic, for this artist from South Jersey and Philadelphia to go abroad and be inspired to paint something like this. We don't think he got to the Middle East. We don't think he got to North Africa. I don't know for sure. But what I have learned is that the Paris Exposition of 1867 included 3 Turkish buildings, which could very well have inspired him during his 1866-67 trip. So this is from a book about that World's Fair in Paris. There's a summer pavilion, a mosque, a fountain, and what's been described as a bathhouse, a Turkish bathhouse. All of which could have played a role in inspiring him to paint these exotic types of subjects, Middle Eastern type subjects. He was really doing well in the late 1880s, early 1890s when he painted this. This is the Old Homestead from 1892, and it is large. It is about 6 by 12 feet. There are a number of studies, smaller paintings that were studies for it. This got the eye, caught the eye of a liquor company called Canavan, and they used his painting on the label of Canavan's Old Homestead rye, pure rye whiskey, 1892-ish, which I think is just fabulous. So he was doing pretty well in the late 80s, early 90s. He also painted a 7 by 14 foot Old Homestead, but this is the barnyard view. The last view had the back of the house. This has the barn on the right. Is that the same one? I hope it's not the same one. And the house on the left. I have a feeling I might have included one that's more house and barn here. The large painting was on display at Wanamaker's, the original Wanamaker's store in Philadelphia, and I called so many people trying to figure out what happened to it and when. I think it is owned by a wealthy man somewhere. I did see the other one. Okay, so those were my two artists from Salem. I have two famous artists, Winslow Homer and Thomas Eakins, who tend to be in the history books, art history books, whereas the artists of Salem aren't necessarily. But I put in somebody interesting in the middle just to have something other than portraits and landscapes. And I do have to keep an eye on the clock. This is John Peto, who was from Philadelphia. This is a portrait, a photograph of him in his house around age 58. 1853, born in Philadelphia, studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. In 1889, moved to Island Heights, which is near Toms River. He had two aunts living there, so we think he went partly to be near family. The aunts may have even stayed with him at times. And he lived there for the rest of his life. He wasn't necessarily making enough with his art, so as you can see, for additional income, he played cornet, like trumpet, for the Island Heights Methodist Camp. And he and his wife also took in seasonal boarders. So over the summer, they would take in, renters. Here's Island Heights underlined in red. Toms River is above it to the left. The barrier island off to the right. It is, I think, still open as a studio museum, an artist's home museum, the John F. Peto Studio Museum. It opened, I think, in 2011. This is the house, which is a lovely house, architecture. I want to ask you what it is, but I'll ask you later. This is the studio building, which they added onto the house, Peto's Studio. I don't think he had a sign on it in his day, but since then it's been added. And inside it's got great colors. My painting teacher in college loved this color, so I don't know if it was an artist thing of that era. I've labeled a stretcher for a large painting, larger than many that he did. That's what that is. And here's his easel. It's got a photograph of something on it. Maybe a photograph of, I don't know, a painting. There he is in front of the stairs on the right, and those are the same stairs that are in the photograph of the artist. This is looking the other way in the main room. Whoops, didn't mean to do that, and can't back up. What he's known for are letter rack paintings, which is what you see here. People would take a wooden door, a wooden board, and stretch ribbon or string over it and use tacks or nails to just anchor the string or the ribbon, and then you could tuck letters and bills and postcards and photos that people sent you or gave you And it's, you may know the term trompe-l'oeil, fool the eye realism. It's a French term, trompe-l'oeil, fool the eye. L'oeil is the eye. It works best if it's flat subjects. And that's what Peto did. For a long time, his work was confused with William Michael Harnett, another trompe-l'oeil American artist. But Harnett painted sort of after the hunt, horns hanging from walls and dead rabbits and lots of things, more three-dimensional things hanging from walls. And Peto really excelled at these very flat letter rack paintings. This one is an actual letter rack because it's got the ribbons that things are tucked into. I didn't know how big the screen would be. I always come prepared with a few details. So we've zoomed in on just the center of that last painting. Here's the ribbon with tacks or nails anchoring it to this wooden background. There's a photograph of Abraham Lincoln tucked into it. There's a dinner card as if maybe somebody's staying with them and they hand out a dinner card to anyone who's paid for meals along with lodging. String just hanging from things. A white clay pipe of a kind that used to be very popular. I think they were Dutch, but found in America too. And probably letters. Oh, a little bit of a newspaper here. An article on something that he's clipped and stuck on the wall in this arrangement. This is called The Letters, and I just found it on the internet recently and I thought it was nice. It's got a New York stamp, postmark on this letter to H.D. Van Sart, Esquire in Island Heights. I looked for the ones that had New Jersey names. So Island Heights, New Jersey, and the letter behind it is also, it says Heights, so I'm assuming it's Island Heights. Zoomed in a little bit so you can see, and this is what the trompe-l'oeil artist loves to do. Peto especially paints very flat things, but isn't it nice that he's torn the end of the letter to pull it out and read it, and in the process sort of peeled back a little bit of that front of the envelope, and it's a lined envelope. It has a green-blue interior color, so that's interesting. Someone's card, Mrs. A something. I think it's Mrs. Yeah, looks like Mrs. So a calling card. Tom's River Yacht Club, 1904, also has a photograph, also has an envelope, has something that's been torn away, which is kind of a nice, I don't know, device, nice thing to have done. And here's Tom's River Yacht Club, a ticket to get in for some event, I'm assuming. TRYC, top right, Tom's River Yacht Club. Here's the top, TRYC, 1864. Oh, 1904 is when we think it was painted. JHS must be the man there. It doesn't work for John F. Peto. Here's the bottom part. And I think this is funny. There are some things down here as if they're resting on the frame. A burnt out match is resting on the frame. I'm sorry I don't have the frame. A dinner ticket is tucked into the frame. 2 unlit matches and a nail are tucked into the frame. And a cigarette, which is burning and has smoke coming up from it, is behind a little nail. Talk about making me nervous. Nobody should be sticking a cigarette on a wooden wall. Last Peto is Tom's River, 1905. Photograph at the top. This one's odd. I'm not quite sure why it's on a hinge. He's apparently using a wooden door to tape things or tack things to, nail things to. You can see string hanging in the top right and a nail with its shadow on the left. There's the bottom of Tom's River, 1905. HH, don't know. Maybe a patron, maybe someone who bought the painting. So we're finally at our big names. If you had an art history class on American art, you might know Thomas Eakins from Philly and Winslow Homer from a number of places, Boston, New York, and Maine. Here's Eakins, a self-portrait, age 58, born, lived, and died in Philadelphia. And just to compare, Eakins is a great portrait painter. This might not even be his best one. I think maybe my slide is a little washed out. This is one of Canero's best, and it holds up pretty well in comparison. And Charlotte Bonaparte, it's a little more sculptural, sort of carved looking, a little less like human flesh, if that makes any sense. The Eakins house in Philadelphia is at 1729 Mount Vernon Street, and his father added that addition at the top of the building. It's a building on an end of a row. Added it in 1874 as a studio for his son. And this is a perfectly lovely black and white photo, but I love Google. So I did a Google Street View to see what it looks like now. And I wouldn't have known that it was painted red from that black and white photograph. And the trees have grown up. And you can also see the little alley to a backyard on the left edge. It's a little like the house Joseph Bonaparte was in, at least in having that end wall. Here's Eakins teaching. 1861, he was a student at PAFA, Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. 1864 to 5, he also took courses in anatomy and dissection because he wanted to really get it right at Jefferson Medical College, which for many years Jefferson University now had one of his most famous surgery paintings in their boardroom. In 1876, he started teaching at PAFA, Pennsylvania Academy. In 1878, he became a salaried professor, which I guess is better than being paid by the course or by the hour. And in 1886, he was forced to resign. So I would ask, if I wanted you to also be recorded in this awkward fashion, if you know why he was forced to resign, but I will tell you, it was a mixed boys and girls art class, and he had a male model, and he removed the loincloth from the male model. And so all those impressionable little girls went home and told mom and dad, "Oh my God, you should have seen what happened in my art class today. A naked man." And he was fired or asked to resign. He was incensed. He felt that working from the nude was important. He had studied cadavers. He had studied bodies at the morgue and at Jefferson Medical College. But there was no going back, and he did resign. This is him in a teaching situation, classroom. Because of this, he sympathized with an earlier Philadelphia artist named William Rush. I think there was also a William Rush who was either medical or law, but this William Rush was an artist, a sculptor. And William Rush, early in the 19th century, was criticized for nude female models, for working from the nude. This is William Rush carving his allegorical figure of the Schuylkill River, painted in 1908 by, the carving is being done in 1808, I think it's a carving of 1808 painted many years later. William Rush was also, as I said, ostracized for painting nudes earlier in the 19th century. So what you see is he's carving a figure who has clothes, but he's working from a female nude who has a heavy book on her shoulder in order to get the pose right, because his allegorical or symbolic sculpture is holding a water bird on its shoulder. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. She symbolizes the Schuylkill River, and so she's got a bird on her shoulder, and the body has to respond to that weight, and so his model has a book to get that body action. She has a chaperone. There's a lady, maybe her mother or an aunt or someone knitting, sewing in the corner to chaperone this process of the young woman posing nude. This is a bronze copy. The original allegorical sculpture by William Rush, the Schuylkill River, was wood, and it was placed in a fountain in central Philadelphia, Center City, and wood does not do well in water, and we don't have it anymore. But luckily a mold was made of it, and a bronze cast copy, which you can see at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So that is the look of the sculpture that this early 19th century artist was making. And you can see the water bird a little bit better there. We do, for some reason, have the head. I guess the head was above most of the water in the fountain. I saw this at Pennsylvania Academy a number of years ago. So that is the actual wooden head painted white of that sculpture in the painting. And another early 19th century artist, John Lewis Krimmel, painted Center Square on the 4th of July around 1812. And right in the middle, right here, is the wooden sculpture painted white to look like marble, right? To look a little nicer, a little classier than it really was. But it's in a fountain and didn't last. Eakins painted a number of these subjects because he had been fired, he was obsessed, he was hurt, and I think he wanted to make a point about the importance of the nude figure for artists. And as the series goes along, it gets more and more, or less and less detailed, more vague. This is one of the last paintings in the series, and all it has is the sculptor assisting the model down off of some kind of platform that she's standing on to pose for the Schuylkill River allegorical figure. Okay, so he did also paint New Jersey. I just probably spent too long on that. Pushing for rail, the bird rail. I don't know if anybody's hunted for rail, but this is a New Jersey marsh subject. And because the figures are so tiny, it's 1874, it's Eakins, who was sporty. He was a sporty guy. He wrestled, he swam, he rode. There's a portrait of a famous sculler, and he's in the background in another long boat, another skull. So I put in a rail bird, dusky moorhen. Again, for the scientists, Ganula tenebrosa, scientific name. This is the left edge where we have a man and probably his black servant as part of the party hunting for rail, shooting for rail. Here's the central pair who are on a flatboat. It's a little hard to see the boat, but the man in the red shirt with the gun you can sort of see the boat under him. And sailboats in the background in that one and also in this one. You can see the flatboat here again. One guy is always poling the boat along and the other is shooting for the birds. He also came over. Oh no, I did it and it won't go back. It just won't go back. The one on the left is Eakins shad fishing on the Delaware River. He went to the Gloucester area and did a number of sketches and photographs because he was all about the realism, and he turned them into a series of paintings of people shad fishing. So I haven't done either of these things, the hunting for rail or the fishing for shad, but I guess they're New Jersey things. And I just put it in with one of the Nicholson marsh scenes to show that it holds up pretty well. Nicholson was a little more uneven. Eakins was definitely the better and the more famous artist, but Nicholson did quite well. Not so much with the figures. He was more of a pure landscape guy, and figures in Nicholson tend to be really small, just a few right there. And Eakins obviously can handle figures as well as landscape. So here's another shad fishing at Gloucester on the Delaware River, 1881. And a watercolor version, taking up the net. Photographs by Eakins of this event, which along with watercolors and drawings, he worked up into paintings back in the studio. I think it might be my last one, shad fishing, a painting on the left, and an Eakins photograph, shad fishing, hauling the net on the right. You may also know that he painted Walt Whitman, sort of the most famous poet of that era in New Jersey. Not that he was in New Jersey his whole life, but Eakins visited him after he had moved to Camden. Since 1873, Whitman was in Camden. Eakins visited in 1887. Here's a lovely side portrait, profile portrait of Whitman by Eakins. And here's the painting that he did that I guess is the culmination of the series, the snapshots, the more formal portraits, the sketches. This is the one that has had the most attention given to it. Winslow Homer, I know it's 4. Winslow Homer, our other famous artist, born in Boston, moved to New York City in 1859, 1884 moved to Maine. He was also a rugged, kind of sporty guy. Both of them painted outdoors a lot. Although that mustache looks a little bit like a dandy with a mustache to me. He got his start as an illustrator in the Civil War era. He was 25 when the Civil War began in 1861. This is a Harper's Weekly cover with 2 of his drawings, which have been converted into wood engravings and printed with the newspaper. This is the Sharpshooter, which is in my textbook on American art, one of his engravings from the Civil War. This I find very sad, the empty sleeve at Newport. So it's 1865, the war is over. The beautiful young woman has her husband back again, but he's lost an arm and tucks that sleeve into his jacket. Somehow under the lapel, you can sort of see it there. He does have his right hand, but this sleeve is empty and has been pinned to his coat under the lapel. So she's driving. She's driving the horse and carriage. He first became known as a painter in New York when he exhibited a Civil War subject. It's an American soldier on the right and 3 Confederate soldiers on the left in gray. Different ages, you know, it was a war where young and old and people with the full outfit and people who just hodgepodge together some clothing all fought together. 3 years later, he's painting vacation subjects. Nobody wants Civil War subjects anymore. We all want to move on. This is 1869. The war's been over for several years. And he paints New Jersey. He paints Long Branch. And I put it in with a Nicholson just to show that both of them do figures and landscape. Nicholson in a kind of looking to the past, looking to our rural past. Homer very much today in 1869, modern New Jersey in 1869. Detail of the women on the right. He had been to Paris, so he might have seen the Impressionists. There is a thought that the bright colors here, although he doesn't do the brushy quality of the French Impressionists, he does have the light and the bright colors. And this is down the hill with a very steep stair. I don't think I've been to Long Branch, strangely. And I think these must be cabanas. But if anybody disagrees, let me know, maybe after. I put in a couple of kinds of cabanas. A cute little blue and white one on the bottom that's more recent, and then the kind of changing cabana that women would change in for modesty and literally be pulled to the edge of the water. They didn't want to walk across the beach with, you know, the legs below the knees and the arms below the elbows showing, because those parts were normally covered. He made engravings of the same kinds of subjects as you saw with the empty sleeve at Newport. This is the beach at Long Branch, and those girls are still in their fancy dresses. There are a few people in bathing costumes in the far background. Here are a couple of girls in bathing costumes. The cute thing about this is that he signed it with his initials, as if that girl on the right has a crush on someone whose initials are W.H. Winslow Homer. So he sort of signed it with initials in a, a very cute way, joking way. These are not New Jersey girls. These are girls in New England somewhere, but these are those bathing costumes that apparently they're okay with having their portraits done, but others would be pulled all the way to the beach in a cabana with wheels. Another, maybe more famous New Jersey subject, and we're racing to the finish line here, just so you know. The lifeline is a very dramatic subject from the 1880s, 1884. It's based on an event that he witnessed in Atlantic City, a life-saving event. A ship went aground, and they attached this line between ship and shore. I think you had to shoot it out there in some way to the ship, and then you'll see in a minute. It's dramatic. He's been to England and painted the coast there, and things change after he goes to England, and his style is more stormy. You just saw Girls at Long Branch. Here it's Atlantic City, and it's danger. It's not a pretty day, a pleasant day. It's something very different. Up close, we see that the hero of the scene is anonymous. There's that red scarf or shawl that's right across his face, so we don't know who's doing the saving. We do, however, see the young woman, and her dress is, I would say wet t-shirt territory. Her dress is soaked, and it's stuck to her, and she shows a little bit of skin above the knee, above the stockings, the level of her stockings. And I've seen this painting for years, taught this in many classes, and it was only maybe 10 years ago that a big deal was made of the fact that this would have been a bit racy in 1884. Yes, she's nearly drowned. Yes, she's been in the water, but did he have to show skin? So you may know about the breeches buoy. This is one in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but that's what the young man is in as he holds the woman, and they use the ropes and the pulley to pull them to shore to save her life. And this was a big deal in the 19th century. Breeches buoy, there's another one in use right to the left of center, and you can see how it's attached to the mast of a ship that's run aground, and the other end is on shore. And people might be helping to pull the ropes. The undertow is not quite as famous, but it's another New Jersey shore subject. We think it was near Atlantic City, and two young women got out beyond the safe point, got caught in the undertow, and had to be rescued. And all we see this time are two muscular, heroes who are saving them. And the two young women in the middle, one clings to the other, and he's pulling a rope that is somehow cinched around her. Maybe it's got a breeches buoy. I don't know what exactly the man on the left is holding, but he's got a rope that helps her come into shore. So the later Homer is very dramatic, very much about ocean subjects, big waves, the danger of the ocean. He moves to Maine in 1884 and stops painting figures for the most part. He paints the coast. And the coast of Maine is much rockier than most of the New Jersey beaches. So this is Sunlight on the Coast, 1890. It's got waves. It's got light hitting through the waves. It's got light reflecting off the water out there. And this is what he does pretty much for the rest of his life. So we've seen artists affiliated with Point Breeze, including local ones, and Karl Bodmer from Switzerland, and Napoleon's niece, Joseph Napoleon's daughter, Charlotte. We've seen artists of Island Heights on the ocean and Salem on the Delaware, Pito on the left, Canero's portraits in the middle, Nicholson on the right. Again, we've seen the famous American artists who came here, didn't necessarily live here. Eakins from Philadelphia, Homer from New York City at the time, ends up in Maine, painting variously portraiture, mostly for Eakins, and landscapes and saving people at sea subjects for Winslow Homer. You've been very attentive, so I say thank you and the end.